The incredible truth behind the Roman Empire. 7 surprising discoveries that will inspire you. Sarah stood at the front of her classroom, staring at the faded chalkboard cluttered with dates and names that had long lost their magic. The ticking wall clock echoed in her ears, its relentless sound catching the attention of her students, reminding her of the lessons of transformation and time. But here, in this small Ohio town, surrounded by mismatched desks and the shadows of budget cuts, despair began to creep in. The weight of her family's legacy was heavy. Each ancestor had dedicated their lives to teaching, so what did it say about her that she couldn't inspire her students? The passion she once had felt muddied by a blend of pressure and inadequacy. How can I ignite a fire for history when I'm dodging questions about standardized tests? She pondered. In moments of reflection, she would envision a classroom filled with enthralled faces, captivated by the saga of the Roman Empire. But the reality was starkly different. A sea of bored expressions awaited her every attempt at engaging storytelling. And then came the idea. What if she could reach beyond the confines of this outdated system? What if her late grandfather had left behind more than just dusty boxes and forgotten memorabilia? When she decided to search through his attic one fateful afternoon, she hoped to find inspiration and perhaps a piece of history that she could share. But as her fingers brushed against the surface of the old Roman coins, scrolls, and letters, she felt a twinge of trepidation. Was this truly a sign or just a relic of the past? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Sarah deciphered her grandfather's letters meticulously, anxiety wormed its way into her thoughts. They weren't just antiquated phrasings. They held the power of connection, fervently recounting tales of individuals who thrived amid the rise and fall of empires. Each line inspired her to reconnect with her own dreams of teaching. But what if her enthusiasm was met with ridicule from her colleagues? She envisioned their dismissive expressions, arms crossed, eyes rolling. How could she bridge the gap between her newfound zeal and their rigid adherence to the curriculum? The day of the conference loomed closer, and every time she rehearsed her presentation, doubts clouded her mind. What if she stumbled over her words, or worse, choked under the scrutiny of her peers?
Sarah found herself oscillating between determination and despair. Could she present these connections of history in a way that resonated with the audience, or was she merely setting herself up for failure? Each moment passed with suffocating weight. She could feel the pressure mounting. As she replayed the scenario in her head, a room full of critical faces assessing her every move, panic twisted in her gut. Could she overcome her fears to reclaim the art of teaching before the flame she had ignited sputtered out under the weight of academic rigidity? The silence that awaited her could be deafening, a challenging reminder of the walls she had never quite breached. As she rehearsed one last time, she felt the tension reach its peak, each breath heavy with anticipation, leaving Sarah dangling on the precipice of transformation, the inevitable aftermath lingering just out of reach. The day of the conference arrived, and the air in the gymnasium buzzed with nervous energy. Sarah stood at the entrance, gripping her folder tightly, her knuckles whitened with tension. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare on the faces of her peers as they filtered in, each one lost in their own thoughts and expectations. She could feel the weight of their scrutiny, and a wave of anxiety washed over her. What had she really signed up for? She forced herself to take a deep breath. This was more than just a presentation. It was a reckoning of her passion and identity as an educator. The old Roman coins and letters would not just be artifacts, they would serve as a bridge to her students, a connection to history that transcended dusty textbooks. Taking another breath, she mentally recited the main points, reminding herself of the excitement she felt during her discoveries. The chatter in the room diminished as the first presenter stepped forward. Each presentation unfolded like a repetitive cycle, data-driven, formulaic, devoid of the very passion that once ignited her interest in teaching. As she listened, agitation blossomed in Sarah's chest. Were they even aware of the potential their subjects held? The thought energized her resolve. She needed to break this mold. Finally, it came time for her turn. As she approached the podium, the faint scent of wood from the platform surrounded her like a whispering companion, urging her to keep moving forward. She glanced at the audience and found a mix of boredom and skepticism written across their faces. But deep within, a flicker of determination ignited. This was her moment. As she began speaking, her voice shook slightly, but she anchored herself with the memory of her grandfather and the stories behind each artifact she presented. She shared tales of gladiators, emperors, and the daily lives of common Romans, weaving them together like the strands of her grandfather's letters. With every word, the intense pressure started to peel away, replaced by an undeniable possibility. To her surprise, she noticed some eyes widening.
Faces that had once appeared uninterested began to shift closer, drawn in by the narrative. Sarah leaned into the moment, bypassing her prepared notes to follow the spark of connection forming. This was not just about information. It was about engagement, veneration of humanity across history. Suddenly, she spotted a colleague who had expressed skepticism earlier. Arms crossed, defined features still, but something had shifted. Their expression was changing, absorbing her words. The realization that her passion could penetrate the barriers they all had built around their subject matter illuminated her mind with clarity. She was no longer just a teacher struggling against a tide of apathy. She was a conduit for curiosity and creativity. As the applause erupted, her heart raced with exhilaration. It felt surreal, almost like a dream from which she would soon awaken. But she reminded herself this was real. The conversation sparked from her presentation could ripple into her classroom. She felt a sense of empowerment surging through her. Among the approving nods and murmurs of appreciation, she caught a glimpse of her fiercest critic, whose face now showed contemplative interest. Instead of fear or doubt, Sarah felt a budding anticipation of what this could mean for not just her career, but her journey as an educator. But as she stepped off the stage, she was met with an unexpected emotional twist. A note slipped discreetly into her hand as she passed a group of colleagues. It bore a challenge. If you think you inspired them, wait until they inevitably turn back to their disdain for history. Are you ready to face that? The very notion that her new beginning could so quickly be stained by reality gripped her with unease. There was more to this path she had embarked upon than a simple presentation. The fight to inspire varied minds demanded more than passion. It would require relentless courage and adaptability. As she stood in the aftermath of her momentous achievement, she recognized the steep road ahead, one fraught with both promise and peril, echoing the very complexities of the history she aimed to share. What began as a presentation turned into something deeper, an awakening of the formidable challenge before her. Would she be able to maintain the spark of inspiration amid the inertia of an indifferent system? As she left the gymnasium, fortified yet pensive, a new spark ignited within her. It was no longer just about teaching history. It was about fighting for it and preparing to confront whatever or whoever stood in her way. The weeks following the conference shifted Sarah's perception of her role as an educator. Each day in her classroom felt more like a mission than a job, and she relished the challenge. The note she received had haunted her thoughts, but also pushed her to evolve.
She started revising her lesson plans to include interactive activities inspired by her presentation, artifacts coming to life through debates, reenactments, and story-driven projects. Her students' faces, once dulled by disinterest, began to light up with curiosity. However, as invigorating as this transformation felt, she soon encountered a reality that rattled her newfound enthusiasm. The first moment of disillusionment came during a discussion surrounding an upcoming project. A group of students had opted for a historical debate, intending to argue the merits and failures of Julius Caesar's reign. Her heart raced at the idea of them grappling with complex historical figures instead of memorizing dates. But as she moved from desk to desk, I overheard side conversations laden with cynicism and dismissal. "Why bother with this old stuff?" one student remarked. "It's not like we'll use it in real life." A knot tightened in her stomach. As each skeptical comment landed in her ears like stones, Sarah felt her confidence waver. Is this what the colleague meant in that note? The looming suspicion that no amount of passion could save them from indifference loomed larger. Doubt crept in as she locked eyes with her students. Would they revert to apathy despite her best efforts? Determined to confront this challenge head-on, she decided to invite an external perspective. Sarah reached out to her local historian, a renowned expert who had captivated audiences before. With a blend of excitement and dread, she organized a workshop where the historian would share untold stories of Rome's populace beyond the emperors and gladiators, their struggles, aspirations, and lives. Perhaps exposure to a different narrative could reinvigorate her students' interest. As the workshop approached, she was gripped by conflicting emotions. On one hand, this could be a breakthrough, a moment where her students could find a connection to the past. On the other hand, a deep-seated anxiety prickled her consciousness. What if the historian's presence only emphasized her shortcomings as an educator? Was she merely facilitating their learning or simply playing the part of a mediocre conductor in a symphony she had yet to master?
The day of the event arrived, and Sarah watched from the back of the classroom as students filed in, their expressions unreadable. The historian engaged everyone with stories of ordinary Romans living through extraordinary times. She began to see some sparks flicker among her students, their heads nodding, their eyes wide with intrigue. Yet a single comment from the back corner shattered her burgeoning hope. "Boring. Why should I care?" a voice shot out, harsh and dismissive. The air in the room thickened with tension. Sarah felt the weight of that critique bear down on her, the urgency of the moment hammering her resolve. Now more than ever, she understood that this wasn't just about her presentation or her passion. It was about resilience.
She had to acknowledge their feelings, but redirect their focus. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion," she said, her voice steady but low. "But think of the lives behind these stories. If we discard them, we lose a part of who we are. The past is not just history, it's a part of our identity." The response was a mixed bag. Some faces reflected genuine contemplation, while others remained stubborn and distant. Yet Sarah felt a shift, a tiny breakthrough among the discomfort. Perhaps inspiration wouldn't come in a tidal wave, but instead in smaller, trickle-like revelations. As the workshop concluded, she approached the historian with gratitude, even as a turbulent storm of thoughts churned in her mind. The encounter with her students had exposed a harsh truth. Igniting curiosity required a relentless fight. It wouldn't just involve her passion, but would demand a more profound exploration of their minds and hearts. Stepping outside to breathe, Sarah gazed towards the horizon, the weight of her journey grounding her, yet filled with growing resolve. Now, instead of fearing indifference, she considered a new strategy: engagement through co-creation. What if she invited her students to help design the curriculum? What if their voices shaped the historical narratives they explored? The thought startled her, but clearly sparked an intriguing possibility. Would this new approach become the turning point she desperately sought, or would it unveil more daunting challenges ahead? As the sun dipped below the school's horizon, she stood on the precipice of an audacious decision that could redefine her trajectory as an educator. The moment had come for her to face a new dilemma. How would she navigate this genuine engagement without losing her own identity and passion along the way? The following weeks unfolded with a mix of anticipation and anxiety as Sarah prepared for her ambitious new approach to teaching. The idea of co-creating the curriculum with her students was both exhilarating and daunting. She could envision the vibrant discussions, the laughter, and the eventual ownership they might take over their learning. But self-doubt lingered like an uninvited guest, whispering worries into her ear. What if they rejected her ideas? What if they took her vulnerability as weakness? Yet, as the sun rose on the morning of their first brainstorming session, she felt the wavering resolve hardening into determination. In her mind, she mapped out how to frame the discussion, how to facilitate an environment where her students felt safe to share and explore. After all, learning should not merely be transactionary, it had to be reciprocal. As her students filled into the classroom, Sarah sensed a change in atmosphere. This time, it wasn't just a sea of indifferent faces. There was curiosity bubbling beneath the surface, albeit mostly masked by teenage bravado. "Okay, everyone, today we're going to create our own historical projects," she announced, her heart racing.
"I want to hear your ideas on what you find interesting about history, and, this is the best part, you'll help decide what we'll study together." She responded to the initial silence with an inviting smile, not wanting to lose them to skepticism. "I know history can feel like a bunch of old dates and dry texts. Let's change that. Let's find out what it means for us today." As she encouraged discussion, the first few attempts were stunted. A couple of students seated in the back launched a few dismissive remarks about how boring it seemed, their indistress a palpable wall. But Sarah refused to accept defeat. Instead, she drew on her instincts, recalling her own academic experiences, how her teachers who engaged her personally had left lasting impressions. A particularly quiet girl named Mia finally spoke up. "What about the daily lives of people? Like, what did they eat or wear?" The comment was a small but significant win. It crackled through the room like electricity, drawing in the other students. Encouraged by Mia's drive, Sarah seized the opportunity. "Exactly! Let's think about how we can dive into everyday Roman life, the stories that don't always make the textbooks." As their discussion deepened, students slowly shed their indifference. Initiatives emerged, from examining the role of women in ancient society to exploring culinary traditions. Sarah noticed her once cynical students engaged, eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. But amid this budding excitement, small voices of doubt persisted. Questions gnawed at her. Was she equipped to guide them in discussions about historical content she hadn't mastered? How would she distill their varying interests into cohesive projects? The session culminated in an unexpected flurry of ideas, yet Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty. The energy, while potent, left her teetering on the edge of control. They had sparked interest, but would she be able to nurture it into something meaningful? The next day, Sarah formulated a plan. She would set up groups based on these ideas, pressing them to research their topics and eventually present findings. It felt risky, but a flicker of hope blazed within her. Perhaps this was her real chance to not only engage her students, but to empower them. As she walked home after school, the weight of the day settled upon her like a heavy blanket. This new path could lead to innovation, but it also flooded her mind with questions about her responsibilities as a facilitator. Navigating this dynamic teaching environment would require precision and another level of intentionality she had yet to confront. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by pages of resources, struggling to find the right balance between guiding her students and allowing their voices to shape the course. Could she step back enough to let them shine without losing her footing as their educator?
A determination bubbled to the surface. She needed to dig deeper, step out of her comfort zone, embrace the challenge of uncertainty if she was to stake her claim in the educational landscape. She knew confronting her fears was only the beginning. Tomorrow would not just be another day in the classroom, it would be a test of her own resolve. Would she embrace this uncertainty and forge ahead, or retreat into the security of conventional methods she'd grown accustomed to? The stakes felt higher than ever as Sarah lay awake, weighed down by both excitement and apprehension. And then the question hit her. What if her students' success meant redefining her role as an educator, not as a manager of knowledge, but as a partner in discovery? Would she dare to embrace this transformation, even if it meant leaving her priorities uncertain and unguarded? As she closed her eyes, she pondered what transformation might unfold within herself as she invited her students to take their history into their own hands. The following morning, Sarah stepped into her classroom fortified by a new sense of purpose. As she glanced around, the energy that had been ignited during their last session lingered like a warm glow, illuminating their faces with possibilities. The thought quickened her pulse. Today was the real test. Would she be able to convert the students' eagerness into meaningful exploration? Before diving into group activities, she decided to share a personal story, her own encounter with history during her college days. It was a mundane experience at first, stumbling upon a dusty book about Roman domestic life in the library. But the blend of aromas from ancient food, the sounds of daily life, and the intertwining stories fascinated her deeply, redefining her perspective of history. Sarah realized that such authenticity could breathe life into her students' projects and remind them that history wasn't merely a series of events, but a tapestry woven from everyday experiences. "Have you ever thought about what life would have been like for a young girl in ancient Rome?" she asked, knowing she was casting a net. The beauty and the routine, the limits and freedoms. Imagine the stories she could tell. Murmurs of intrigue rippled through the room. Sarah seized this spark, urging her students to let their imaginations flow. They began brainstorming character-driven narratives to explore, individuals navigating their realities amid the grandeur of an empire. Gradually, larger combinations emerged, new alliances formed between the students. Some worked on exploring women's influence in the home, while others dove into the role of merchants. As Sarah watched them collaborate, she felt a mix of pride and apprehension. They were beginning to discover their voices, but the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. What if they didn't grasp the historiography? What if their narratives veered too far from established facts?
Pushing those thoughts aside, she roamed the classroom, listening to their debates and offering subtle guidance. Students articulated their thoughts with increasing confidence. But as their excitement swelled, so did her self-doubt. Questions clawed at the edges of her serenity. Could she truly facilitate their learning without stunting their creativity? What if her guidance steered them away from their instincts? Each moment of clarity slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. Then came a moment that would challenge her resolve. One student, a boy named Lucas, known for his brash and sometimes dismissive nature, dismissed another's idea with a wave of his hand. "That's dumb. What's the point of knowing what people ate?
Isn't it all just about wars and rulers? The air thickened with tension, and Sarah felt a knot tightening in her stomach. This was her moment to confront the environment she was fostering. She had envisioned these students as partners in discovery, yet here was Lucas embodying a traditional view, threatening to squash the curiosity blooming around him. "Lucas," she began, her heart racing as she chose her words carefully, "isn't it important to understand what people were like, their everyday lives? Wars were shaped by the very people you're dismissing." His defiance crumbled slightly at the challenge, but Sarah sensed the need for a deeper engagement. Maybe what's dumb is letting our fears of boring history keep us from exploring what really happened. Let's choose to dig beneath the surface together. What impact do you think daily life had during the Empire? Sarah felt the room shift as students rallied around the idea, refocusing their energy. Lucas's expressions transformed. The fire of resentment flickered into something resembling contemplation. After class, Sarah sat alone, reflecting on her response. She recognized the complexity of her role, not only as an educator, but as a mediator of ideas, a custodian of engagement, and sometimes a catalyst for confrontation. The tension between keeping authority and empowering her students loomed over her thoughts like an unwelcome storm cloud, forcing her to question what she valued in the classroom. Would she sacrifice her authority to encourage their exploration, or would she find a way to weave their voices into the fabric of her guidance? As she closed her planner for the day, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility shift again, resting a little less heavily. Perhaps she was beginning to understand the art of balance. But as the clock ticked toward the evening, a fresh uncertainty emerged. Was confrontation the key to genuine engagement? And how far would she go to protect this fragile environment of curiosity? Each moment felt heavier than the last.
The realization hit her with profound clarity. This journey was as much about her personal development as it was about her students' futures. Before she could contemplate the implications, her phone buzzed, and a notification flashed on the screen. "Have you heard? There's been a huge discovery about everyday life in ancient Rome. Scholars found new evidence on the diets of commoners. We should talk about it." As her lips curled into a smile, a spark of an idea ignited in her heart. Would this newfound discovery deepen their exploration, or would it open a Pandora's box of uncertainty she hadn't anticipated? Tomorrow would be pivotal, as she realized the stakes had just gotten even higher. Sarah awoke to the sunlight filtering through her curtains, illuminating her thoughts in a way that felt inspiring yet daunting. The newly discovered evidence about ancient Roman diets flashed vividly in her mind. She could sense its potential to not only enhance her students' understanding, but also enrich her own teaching methods. Today could be different, but she couldn't shake the nagging anxiety from the previous day's confrontation. As she prepared for class, she mentally rehearsed how to present the discovery. This wasn't just about facts, it was an opportunity to invite her students deeper into the story of history. Would they be able to harness this new information to craft narratives that felt alive? She envisioned students tasting the past, reflecting the tastes and textures of lives lived millennia ago. Yet uncertainty surfaced again. What if they simply reverted to their comfort zones and focused exclusively on wars and politics? In the classroom, Sarah laid out a selection of ingredients: olive oil, grains, figs, attempting to create an atmosphere that encouraged exploration. As students trickled in, the scents mixed with laughter and curiosity buzzed in the air. Yet as they settled down, her heart pounded. She would have to push them out of their comfort zone again. "Good morning, everyone. I have something exciting to share today, a recent discovery on the everyday lives of common Romans." Her voice wavered slightly, and she chastised herself for not projecting enough confidence. "We tend to think about grand events in history, like wars, but what about the role of food? How did what they ate reflect their lives?" She paused, scanning their faces for reactions. Some looked intrigued, while others still seemed skeptical, Lucas among them, his brow knit in doubt. "I know you're accustomed to the big tickets, glorious battles, or powerful rulers." She locked eyes with Lucas. "But understanding the common people, their diets, their routines, could change everything." As she introduced the narrative possibilities stemming from this discovery, the energy in the room shifted. The students began brainstorming the significance of daily meals. Social class, gender roles, and even cultural influences offered countless threads to pull on.
Sarah saw Lucas shifting in his seat, his initial resistance beginning to melt. "Let's create a project on what a day in the life of a Roman would look like," she proposed. "I want each of you to think about not just the food, but what it meant for your characters. How did it influence their social standing, relationships, and dreams?" Almost instantly, groups formed and discussions erupted. Sarah felt her apprehensions start to dissipate. She moved around the room, encouraging dialogue and diving into conversations as each group shaped their narratives. Their laughter echoed like music, and her heart soared at the realization that they were constructing history together, building layers upon layers of understanding. Yet, amidst the creative energy, doubt crept back in, this time asking whether she was truly facilitating a genuine exploration or leading them towards specific narratives. What if, in her enthusiasm, she was misguiding their instincts? As she observed their interactions, I recognized the balancing act she had to maintain. This wasn't just about them learning history. It was also a profound lesson in self-expression and understanding voices beyond their own. As one group delved into the role of women and food in societal dynamics, Sarah felt an undeniable thrill. They weren't merely absorbing information. They were building historical perspectives that could drive social change today. Would they find the courage to challenge preconceived notions? Would she, as their guide, continue nurturing that courageous spirit, balancing authority and empowerment? The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but a part of Sarah still lingered in the positive energy of creation. They had ventured into a realm of engagement, pushed against barriers, and embraced their collective potential. As her students filed out, Lucas approached her. "You know, I didn't think much about what you were saying yesterday, but now it kind of makes sense. It's not just boring stuff after all," he admitted, a sliver of respect in his tone. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight lift, but another thought flared within her. Had she just grazed the surface of her influence? What more needed to be explored, both for them and herself? She returned to her desk, looking over their projects, the seeds of revelation planted in every corner of the classroom. As her fingers brushed against the papers, a thought struck her. A new inquiry burgeoned. Could their knowledge of these everyday lives reshape their understanding of modern society? The challenge of extending this conversation beyond the walls of their classroom buzzed in her mind. Fired up with a new plan, Sarah picked up her phone and researched further implications of the discovery, bracing herself for yet another adventurous turn in her journey as an educator. The moment had arrived to take another leap, and she felt the unmistakable pull of destiny at her back.
What unexpected truths would emerge when they examined everyday lives in the context of present-day challenges? How deep would the rabbit hole go when she asked her students to connect the fabric of the past with the present? Tomorrow held untold possibilities, and perhaps the real lesson was yet to unfold, waiting to be discovered. As Sarah immersed herself in her research that evening, a flurry of questions erupted in her mind. Modern society felt distant, yet eerily connected to the past. How could ancient Roman diets inform discussions on contemporary issues like sustainability, social equity, or health? Her initial excitement began morphing into an urgent endeavor, transforming her teaching into a catalyst for meaningful change. With each article she read, the implications grew clearer. The Roman fascination with food and its socio-political ramifications struck a resonant chord with today's debates on agriculture and inequality. Could she challenge her students to see themselves not just as historians, but as active participants in the ongoing story of humanity? They had the power to shape narratives, to advocate for the awareness of those around them, and to critique their cultural milieu. This was no longer just a history lesson. It was a chance at activism. Sarah spent the night drafting her lesson plan, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It felt exhilarating to step away from the confines of conventional teaching. Every detail mattered now, not just the contents of the lesson, but the way she would frame discussions. She imagined them wrestling with how the excesses of the Roman elite mirrored modern consumerism, or how the struggles of the common Roman resonated with underrepresented voices today. The shift was dizzying, yet empowering. The next day, excitement buzzed in her veins as she entered the classroom. The scent of the ingredients still lingered, and her students filed in, backgrounds rich with diverse perspectives. This was not a typical day. Today, we're going beyond the past. We're going to investigate how the ancient connects to the present, Sarah announced, her voice steady. After quickly revisiting their previous project on Roman lifestyles, she posed a provocative question. What if the diets we study can lead us to better understand the food politics of our time? Stunned silence followed, then a simmer of murmurs began to fill the air. Sarah pressed on. Think about what you consume regularly. Who grows your food? What systems are in place? And how does this all connect back to the stories of the Roman people? Her direct approach sparked a shift. Students began pairing off, bouncing ideas off each other.
connecting insights, and pushing the boundaries of their past projects. Sarah noticed Lucas, who had been skeptical just days earlier, animatedly discussing agricultural practices. His participation was a revelation. The flame of engagement she had ignited was fanning out before her.
Yet, as discussions blossomed, Sarah grappled with an underlying fear. Was she effectively steering this momentum? Bursts of inspiration came, but so did the reality of navigating misconceptions. What if they veered too far into personal opinion without critical analysis? She felt the burden of accountability weighing on her, but she had to allow them the space to explore, to stumble and rise again. Challenging debates emerged on topics ranging from organic farming to the ethics of food distribution. Sarah observed students becoming collaborators in knowledge building rather than passive recipients. With each spirited exchange, she witnessed an evolution. This wasn't merely historical inquiry, it was a profound exploration of identity, responsibility, and empathy. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Sarah felt a deep sense of pride. In fostering a dynamic environment, she had unwittingly reclaimed her own agency as an educator. Yet doubts remained. Was this respite genuine, or merely a momentary high before the inevitable reality check? She needed to assess how to sustain this momentum. Just as she began to pack her materials, Lucas lingered once again. "I didn't get it before, but now I see why history matters. It's not just facts. It's all connected. It's about us," he said, sincere conviction in his voice. Sarah nodded, caught between exhilaration and trepidation. She was unearthing truths about herself too, realizing the need to guide her students not just toward historical knowledge, but toward building a sense of social consciousness and self-awareness. But before she could delve into additional reflections, an email pinged on her phone, dragging her attention. It was an invitation from the school board to present on the effectiveness of experiential learning. The stakes were higher now, and the realization hit her. This was more than just a lesson plan. It was a potential turning point in her career. As she contemplated the decision, Sarah couldn't shake the thoughts racing through her mind. The implications were vast. Would she have the courage to present her ideas, to advocate for a paradigm shift in educational practices based on her recent insights? What if it didn't go as planned, and her voice was drowned out in the cacophony of conventional wisdom? The timing felt pivotal, and the decision loomed daunting. She had decisions to make that could impact not only her teaching, but also her commitment to instilling values in her students. What path would she choose to thread her newfound purpose in both her life and their futures? The moment Sarah opened the email, her heart raced. Friends talked about adrenaline highs during sports, but it felt different for her. This was less exhilaration and more a battle with apprehension. Presenting her ideas to the school board meant stepping into uncharted territory, a space where self-doubt and ambition collided. She read the invitation twice, measuring the weight of its implications.
As the afternoon sun filtered into her classroom, she felt a creeping sense of isolation. The newly ignited energy from the students still tingled in her veins, but the reality of her own fears pulled taut around her chest. Could she risk exposing herself in this way? Her thoughts spiraled into a maze of uncertainties. What if she failed to articulate her vision? What if her colleagues dismissed her ideas outright, labeling her a naive idealist? These fears echoed like thunder in her mind, threatening to dull the spark she felt just hours earlier. Yet something more profound stirred beneath the surface, a burgeoning desire for authentic transformation that wouldn't let her succumb to inertia. Taking a deep breath, Sarah decided to organize her thoughts. She pulled out a fresh notebook, the nearly blank pages glistening with potential. If she were going to speak, it had to be with purpose. She began jotting down the cornerstone of her beliefs. History was vital, yes, but it must also be relevant, essential for society's resilience in addressing modern challenges. As she brainstormed, a flood of anecdotes emerged, ones that tied ancient Roman societal structures to modern dynamics. The juxtaposition of Roman wealth and modern income disparity, for instance, could resonate with her audience. She could challenge them to consider how lessons from the past bled into current moral obligations. With each note, she felt her resolve solidifying, gaining momentum and clarity. As educators, they wielded a profound influence that extended beyond curriculum, a gatekeeper role in sculpting social narratives. Sarah wondered if she could frame her presentation not merely as a curriculum proposal, but as a call to arms for all educators. Each point she penned ignited an infectious fervor, but with it came a new set of worries. Would her presentation evoke respect, or would it be dismissed? Could she strike the balance between advocating for change while respecting the institution's traditions? The bell rang again, pulling her momentarily from her thoughts. Students filed in, their conversations spilling over with excitement and ambition. Visions interwoven with their discussions on food politics resonated with her own. Their passion breathed life into her own dreams. Perhaps they were a reflection of what she could inspire among her peers as well. As she prepared for another class, Sarah couldn't ignore the sense of dissonance. She had sparked discussions that made her students aware of their food choices and encouraged critical thinking, yet here she was grappling with uncertainty in her own profession. The irony sank in deep. How could she preach empowerment and transformation while being hesitant to embody those very principles herself? Stepping to the front of the room, Sarah steadied her breath and faced her students. They were longing for instruction that connected them to something larger: history, future, and social responsibility.
Today, let's dive deeper, she began, drawing in even the most distracted among them. But as lively discussions unfolded, a knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. The juxtaposition between her students' vibrant ideas and her own internal strife felt stark. Lucas chimed in as the class culminated. "What's our responsibility if we want to change things?" His innocent query echoed in Sarah's mind like a haunting melody. Did any of them understand the weight of responsibility that came with knowledge? Her task was not just to challenge them, but to embody their discussions in her own choices, especially this impending presentation. As the day ended, Sarah prepared to leave with a heavy resolve brewing within. She had a choice to make. Would she step forward, accept the challenge, and allow her students' enthusiasm to buoy her? Was she ready to face the board and advocate for a transformative approach in education, even if it risked exposing her vulnerability? The air thick with anticipation and self-doubt, she squeezed her notebook tightly. With shaking fingers, she hit reply to the email, her decision made. But as she pressed send, a wave of uncertainty crashed over her again, igniting a fresh question. What would happen next if the board dismissed her? What if she had overlooked crucial arguments? The path to her future now felt jagged, filled with brambles of potential rejection. Yet just beyond that darkened path, a light flickered, a chance for rebirth, should she muster the courage to face it. The moment of truth loomed closer. Greater than her fears might be the opportunity to redefine her role as an educator. Would she seize it, or would she allow her apprehensions to extinguish the flame of change she desperately wanted to ignite? Sarah stood in front of her computer, the screen glowing with the unassuming email she had just sent. An epiphany struck her. This was just the beginning. Viewing education through a historical lens was not merely a spirited proposal. It was a mandate she owed to herself, her students, and the community. She allowed herself a moment's breath, amidst the tempest of uncertainty swirling in her stomach. Her steps quickened as she gathered her belongings from the cluttered desk that held witness to countless hours spent nurturing young minds. The sun dipped low on the horizon, and she felt a twinge of urgency mixed with her resolve. The fate of her ideas now lay in the hands of her colleagues, and she would prepare herself for the outcome, whatever it might be. On her way home, she picked up a copy of The History of the Roman Empire from the local bookstore. It felt crucial to dive deeper into the nuances of history, to arm herself more effectively for the pivotal conversation ahead. Sitting on her couch later that evening, she flipped through chapters while jotting down key points, weaving them into her presentation as she went.
The connection between the fall of empires and societal responsibility painted a narrative thread that resonated with her mission. As the words flowed, she experienced a shift. The panic that once constrained her transformed into a magnetic energy. Her mind opened up. Where she initially saw walls, she now saw doorways. The societal struggles of the ancient world mirrored those of today, and perhaps it was her role to illuminate those parallels for her peers. But self-doubt didn't entirely relinquish its grip. A familiar voice pierced through her thoughts. Would her passion come across as naive enthusiasm? Would this endeavor make her appear as just another teacher trying to sway a roomful of skeptics? She clenched her notebook tightly, reminding herself of Lucas's question about responsibility. If she did not take a stand, who would? The next day presented itself with a fresh slate, a blend of uncertainty and excitement. Her colleagues, each worn from their own daily battles, would soon gather for the weekly staff meeting. What if they judged her intentions based solely on surface interactions, dismissing her ideas before allowing them the respect they deserved? A twist of anxiety coiled deep within her as she walked through the school's bustling hallways. Once seated at the table, she faced an array of faces, some intrigued, others distracted, a few sporting skepticism. Sarah took a deep breath, anchoring her mind in the knowledge that they were all educators. They were in this together, even if they sometimes seemed divided. As the conversation flowed aimlessly, she felt the moment arise, a brief pause amid the chatter. "Can we take a moment?" she interjected, voice steady despite the tremors of doubt.
to discuss how historical context could transform our curriculum to connect better with current societal issues. Silence enveloped the space, all eyes gradually shifting toward her. The knot in her stomach twisted tightly, yet there was also a flicker of hope, a chance to expand the education conversation beyond its conventional limits. With her heart pounding, she outlined her vision, weaving anecdotes about Roman governance and how they paralleled contemporary systems. With each word, layers of her self-doubt began to peel away, revealing underlying passion. Responses came slowly at first, but grew more animated as her colleagues began to see the implications in her arguments. They engaged, challenged, and questioned, not dismissively but with curiosity. Though some expressed concerns about tradition, Sarah felt herself rising above the initial fears. Her presentation was not merely a proposal, it was an awakening, shedding light on necessary shifts within their educational framework. As the meeting concluded and hands shook in agreement, Sarah's heart surged with newfound energy. Yet just as relief began to settle in, another wave of anxiety washed over her. This was merely the first hurdle. The larger challenge awaited: the school board.
Would her colleagues support her vision as fervently as they had during this meeting? Stepping outside into the cool air, she drew a deep breath, realizing the transformation she was undergoing was profound. She wasn't merely defending an idea, she was standing on the cusp of change. But beyond this moment, the true test loomed large. How would she channel this newfound momentum in convincing the board? The time had come to face yet another challenge, and Sarah felt the weight of anticipation heavy in her heart. Would she be able to rally her peers in support of her vision against the institutional tide, or would she be swept away, her fervor extinguished before it could spark true change? The day of the presentation for the school board dawned with an undercurrent of anticipation. Sarah woke with a renewed sense of purpose, the sharp bite of early morning air invigorating her spirit. The countless nights spent poring over research and crafting her arguments transformed from anxiety into anticipation. This was not merely about conveying her ideas, it was a pivotal moment to redefine what education could look like in her community. With each classroom she passed, she felt a rush of determination. Her students' conversations about connecting ancient Roman history to contemporary societal concerns lingered in her mind, blending seamlessly into her presentation outline. She knew that if she could tap into this fervor and present it to the school board, she could initiate change far beyond her expectations. As she entered the boardroom, the atmosphere buzzed with the weight of impending decisions. There they were, the administrators, each face a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Seating herself at the round table, Sarah organized her materials, taking a steadying breath. The stakes felt high. Today would not only reveal her growth as an educator, but also test whether she could rally others to envision a broader narrative. The time finally came to present. As Sarah began speaking, her heart thumped rhythmically like a drum, propelling her confidence. She shared her epiphany. History's relevance must extend beyond dates into the lives of the people who lived it. She argued that understanding the intricacies of everyday life in ancient Rome could inform students' understanding of modern social dynamics, inviting them to explore their role in shaping society. Her voice, once tinged with apprehension, now resonated with clarity and conviction. As she unveiled stories of societal structures, inequality, and the pressing need for awareness in their community, she watched as the board's faces shifted from skepticism to engagement. Their posture leaned in, they listened intently. With each point she presented, Sarah wove narratives that linked the past to the present, highlighting issues such as economic disparity and civic engagement.
By granting her students the agency to explore these connections, she illustrated how education could empower them as critical thinkers and socially responsible citizens. This wasn't merely an abstract proposal, it was a living framework for how education could mold empowered individuals. As she concluded, a profound silence enveloped the room. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had not only shared her vision, but ignited a conversation about potential change. The questions from the board members that followed were no longer based on their reservations, but rather on how this model could be implemented. Would it require additional resources? Were there proven methods for integrating these concepts into existing curricula? Sarah navigated these inquiries with confidence, illustrating her commitment to collaborating with faculty to ensure a smooth transition. With every positive exchange, the threads of doubt that once bound her started to unravel. A particular administrator who had previously scrutinized her ideas now nodded in agreement, expressing excitement about the possibility of a pilot program. Recognition surged within her, affirming that her journey was not in vain. She was truly evolving from an uncertain educator into an impactful one. As the meeting adjourned and the board members shook hands with enthusiasm, Sarah felt a rush of accomplishment. She had transcended her inhibitions, not only for herself, but also for her students. Every ounce of effort she had poured into the process crystallized into solid confidence. Those fundamental moments of self-discovery transformed her mindset. She now viewed educational challenges as opportunities for growth, both personal and professional. Her quest to engage her students in history had transformed her into a change agent, carving out a path for others to follow. Walking back to her classroom, Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She reveled in the thought that today was not just about her success, but about the future of her students. They would no longer be passive observers of history, but active participants, empowered to shape their narratives and influence societal change. The realization of this impact offered Sarah profound fulfillment. With her renewed role as an educator, she equipped her students to think critically and engage with the world around them. In this pivotal moment, she understood her journey was only beginning. Sarah had emerged not just as a teacher, but as a catalyst for transformation. The next chapter awaited, replete with challenges and victories, yet she felt equipped to navigate whatever lay ahead, a testament to her persistent growth and unwavering belief in the power of education. Now is the time for you to take action. You need to subscribe now to catch more exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make a difference for our channel.
Comment your reaction to Sarah's incredible journey and share your theories on the future of her teaching. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to embrace the power of personal growth. Let's spread the inspiration together.